Are there
Any quarters? There should be. I saw a rabbi put a couple quarters in there today. Oh boy, we got a lot. I saw a few
you
people.
haven't been in yet yesterday?
Yes.
I got another one next Wednesday.
And that's your last one?
I'm not gonna be here for Shavuot.
Is that your last one?
No, I got some more, but it'll be sometime in June or August, something like that. But I'm saying, I'm not gonna be here for Shavuot. I'm leaving Thursday, the 13th, and coming back Wednesday.
Okay.
After Shavuot, gonna go to California and see my.
Oh, that's right, you said that.
Yeah, we're having sort of my brothers and a couple of nephews, my son, my daughter. He's not that. We don't know. I mean, we don't know when we're gonna see him again.
Oh, you're right.
I hope I can.
I gotta go back to the
We're
job.
gonna have a bat mitzvah in Astana.
Hopefully you get another Yama.
I'm not gonna be there.
Oh.
It's gonna be on. No, I'm gonna be there, but I can't go there.
They're below have not because they're in the show part. Oh, they're already got one? No. Oh? No, they're in the show part, in the seat where the seats are. Hello?
Hey, Howard, how you doing?
Doing fine, how are you?
Thank you.
You feeling
I'm gonna
good?
go eat something before we start.
Okay, get something good to eat.
Yes, so I'll talk to you later.
Okay, buddy,
Take care.
Hello?
fine. She's home. She's
Hello,
gonna be
hello.
Zooming it tonight, she decided.
What do you want to see, how you look up on TV?
Oh, me in particular, I don't think so. I think she's seen me enough on
Hey, Jim.
screen and TV and on stage.
Okay.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Professor Howard, how are you?
I really do.
I am fine. How are you?
Okay.
What do we got? 2, 4,
Pretty
5,
nice
6.
today.
Yes, it is.
Solomon has returned.
Okay.
Solomon, I wondered where you, I thought you joined another show or something.
No, if you come in the evening, you'll see me.
How you doing?
So you get to the nice photograph.
David, very good. Alex is getting up tomorrow morning.
Right.
So hopefully we can have a meeting tomorrow morning for him.
I'll be here.
Good, thank you.
US back home.
Larry is coming. Bob really wants to try. Bob will be here later tonight. Maybe for the program, he might be late. The babysitter didn't show up. He's there.
Hey, Jim.
Here for the, thank you. Here for the program? Yes. Oh, yes.
Hey, Alex,
Yeah.
a Monday repeat is good.
I just like Monday, I like the other.
No, I like Monday because we got the program tonight.
No, no, I want the Monday. I watched Mondays and then I watched the yesterday.
You were happier with it?
I was much happier with yesterday, yes. I could have gone to a Zoom show program from Annapolis because I've got a classmate who is a survivor, just in a way, yeah. As well, he was hid by some Gentile, he and his sister were hid by some Gentile people in Belgium. And her name is at Yad Vashem, you know, the righteous, the God.
Hello, Jim.
How's that? First name for the program? Good, no motion on Zoom. Who likes to? What's the program gonna be, actually?
Here, Paul, there's a program.
Oh, let me see, let me see. No, I'll go get it. Thank you. Is that for the program, though? No? Future for Shabbos. It's getting darker later now, so you can come later.
You don't need it for Shabbos.
Friday night, yeah. Right, right. Friday night is Shabbos. Well, I mean, the Shabbos is stuff. Because you came once, and you were doing your, done a long dance on the beam and everything.
Came for something similar to that.
Right, because Hashanah Rabbah is someone's favorite holiday. And when this favorite part of all the holidays is the Lulav, and every time I come to take it out of the plastic, part of it falls down, and then just a little bit of it, and I gotta arrange it, and. Yeah.
Because what happens is we put the plastic in and the compass on the lip and then.
So Kashana Rabu is actually great because I get to breathe.
The next thing is
You're early.
Hi.
Well, Jeff is great.
Hi.
I think tonight will be fine because it's a problem.
Here's everybody else. No one else is on here.
Hello.
Yeah.
she got the second, today. Today's Thursday. She got,
What about you? You got yours?
Hi.
tomorrow.
7?
Tomorrow after services, I guess.
Is it 7?
No.
What do you go?
Hello, how are you?
Oh, I got this from the.
okay.
Good.
I go Friday.
How are you, Ellie?
Hello.
How are you? Harry,
Fine, fine.
Harry, did you get your second shot?
Yeah, I got my second shot, but it hasn't been 2 weeks.
Did you feel it?
Next Tuesday week.
Okay, good for you. Good for you. And your wife too?
Yeah,
Got it. Sunday. So we're almost there.
Right, very good.
Baltimore College is a lot better than Baltimore City. That's
Fine.
How's everything, Howard?
Everything is fine. I got a haircut today.
Well, you look handsome as ever.
Oh, there you go.
I'm Margie. How's Edie?
Edie is terrific.
Good. Give her my love.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Ellie. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Hi, Ellie.
I'm on.
Hi, Ellie. You feel good, Ellie?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Good, good.
Good.
I'm not at Little League tonight.
You got a break,
We're
huh?
outside. Sunday night, I'll be back at Little League. It's Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday.
Not too bad.
Is he pitching? No, he's the catcher.
No, I finished 2 pitches.
No. No.
Yeah, when my son was in it, we never got to play about half the games because of rain and weather.
It's true. I know. I remember when my sons were in it.
They had it 3 days a week. They were lucky. Lucky. I think about it. Here, always my feet.
It's a lot of fun. He's enjoying it. He's getting the
Years. How old is he?
My son played so many years ago. I can hardly remember.
Yeah, me too. Like he plays Monday Little League, Tuesday soccer, Wednesday Little League, Sunday Little League. I'm telling you, busy boy. Big boy.
That's good.
It is good.
Yeah.
And it gets a lot of energy out.
Correct.
Yeah.
You get you busy.
Keeps me very busy.
Very good.
Yeah, it is good. Hey, Wally, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Yes, I can hear you.
We are preparing for the Memorial game, so tonight is my father's yard site. Tonight,
Oh, okay. Was not a Memorial game, was it?
no, it was not.
So they lost.
Yeah.
But with the Orioles this year, you cannot have any expectations.
I know. But when they win the other, like, one of the other games, you sort of get expectations, you know?
I think next year will be competitive.
Yeah.
They'll have another real good prospect here. I like Grayson Rodriguez and Andy Rush and a few of them. And
some of the young guys on that experience, they do have some good, but the problem is they're not hitting now. Not hitting at all. I mean, they're, first of all, they're practicing very good.
No, I'm gonna tell him no.
They're in a tough division, and all they have faced the Yankees.
Well,
Yet,
Jeff
that's
would tell us.
Okay. אנחנו מוכנים.
just awesome.
Okay, we're gonna get started. It's 7 o'clock, we're gonna get started because there's the... Hey, Wally. Hi, everybody. There's a Yom HaSoah program. And so we want to get started, and I'm gonna relieve Rabbi Herstick of the drusha tonight so that we can get right to Marav and get the program. So, with Alex at the helm, he doesn't want to do a Monday version though. He said he doesn't like Listen, Alex said he didn't like his Monday version. I loved it.
Alex is a natural. He's a natural.
You're a naturalist. Page 232.
אשרי יושבי ביתך, דיכללוך הסלע.
Hashem shkakalo, Hashem shenayla, Hashem
תחילת עיני דבר פי וברך כל בשר שם קדשו לעולם ויד. ואנחנו נברכיה מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה.
Please rise.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
וילמד דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי וחייכון וימיכון וחיי כל בית ישראל. בעגלה וזמן קריב ואמרו אמן.
Amen. Yehi shmei rabba mavorach, liyolam l'meil maya.
וכש מרבה מברך למה מעל מאיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרמם ויתנשא. ויתחדר ויתעלה ויתחלל שמי קודשה בריחו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושרתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
If you're still davening, please continue. Otherwise, we join the Chazan for the repetition beginning on 2:34.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melechei Avotenu Elochei Abraham Elochei Yitzhak Elochei Yaakov Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor B'chon Hara El Elyon Gamel Chasadim Tamim B'kanei HaKol B'zachei HaChazdei Avot U'Mavi Goel L'Nechem Shlema Shema B'Yachava Melech Hazer U'Mashiach U'Magen Baruch Ata Adonai Magen Abraham
Amen.
Ata Gibor L'Olam Adonai Mechayim Mitim Et Arav Lechoshia Mechalchel Chaim B'Chesed Mechayim Mitim B'Rachamim Rabim Salmeach Noflim B'Rofei Chalim U'Matzir Asurim U'Mekayim Amunato L'Shenei Afar Mechamocha Baal Givorot U'Midom Elach Melech Memit U'Mechayim U'Matzmiach Yeshua V'Niman Et Al Chayot Mitim Baruch Adonai Mechayei HaMitim נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדשים אתה בשמי אמרם ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה על זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך הארץ כבודו לא מתן ברוך ימירו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו ודברי קדשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני לעולם על החי וציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור נגיד גדלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושפך עלינו ליפינו לא ימוש לעולם ויד כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני חייל הקדוש אתה חנן לדם דעת ומלמד לנוש בינה חנן מיתך דעת בינה וחשקל ברוך אתה אדוני חנן חדעת חשבנו בינו לתרתך וקרבנו מלכנו לעבודתך וחזירנו בתשובה שלמה לפניך ברוך אתה אדוני חרוצה בתשובה סלח לנו אבינו כחטאנו מחלנו מלכנו כפשענו כי מחל וסלח אתה ברוך אתה אדוני חנון חמרבה לסלוח ריבנו וריבנו וגאולנו מאחר למען שמך כי גאל חזק אתה ברוך אתה אדוני גואל ישראל רפאנו אדוני מן הרופא חשבנו מרשע קטלתנו אתה בכל ערב ושלם על כל מלכותנו כי אל מלך חנון רופא נאמן ורחמן אתה ברוך אתה אדוני רופא חלמו ישראל ברך עלינו אדוני אלוהינו את חשבנו חזות ואת כל מיני טובתה על טובה ותן ברכה על פניך דמה מסבנו מטובך וברך שנתנו חשנים חטבות ברוך אתה אדוני מברך השנים תקע בשופר גדול לחרתנו ועשה נס לקבץ גדולתנו וקבצנו לאחד מארבע כנפות הארץ ברוך אתה אדוני מקבץ נתקי עמו ישראל חשיבה שבתנו כבראשונה ויוצאנו כבתחילה וחסר ממנו יוגן ונחה ומלך עלינו אתה אדוני לעבודך בחסד ורחמים וצדקנו במשפט ברוך אתה אדוני מלך חכם צדק ומשפט ולמלשנים על ציקתיך ובכל חריש וקרגע תבר בכל אביך מחר יחרטו וחזידים מחר תקרת שבית מגר ותחני במחר וימינו ברוך אתה אדוני שווה ערבים ומחני הזידים על חצדיקים ועל חסידים ועל זקניהם בית ישראל ועל פלדת ספריכם ועל גרך הצדק ועלינו יחמור חמך אדוני אלוהינו ותן שכר טוב לכל הבטחים בשמך באמת ושים חלקנו ומחם לעולם ולא נבוש כבך בטחנו ברוך אתה אדוני משלנו מבטח לצדיקים ולירושלים לך ברחמים תשוב ותשכון ביתך כאשר דיברת ובני אתה בקרוב בימינו בניין עולם וכיסא דוד מחר על תחת הכין ברוך אתה אדוני בני ירושלים את צמח דוד עבדיך מחר את עצמך וקרן תרום ברשותך כי לרשותך קיווינו כל חיים ברוך אתה אדוני מצמיח קרן ישועה שמע קולנו נענה לכנו חוס ורחם עלינו וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו כי שמע תפילת ותחננים אתה ומלפניך מלכנו רקם על תשביענו כי אתה שמע תפילת עמך ישראל ברחמים ברוך אתה אדוני שמע תפילה רצה ידנו לכנו בעמך ישראל ובתפילתם וחשב את כבודה ודברי ביתך וישי ישראל תפילתם בחוות קבל ברצון ותחיל הרצון תמיד עבדת ישראל עמך ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכנתו לציון מודים אנחנו לך אדוני אלוהינו אלוהי אבותינו לעולם ועד צורכנו מגן נשינו התחול לדור ודור נודה לך ונספר תפילתך אלוהינו חמסירים בידיך ועל נשמתנו הפקודות לך ועל נפשך שכל ים עמנו ועל נפלתך ותודתך שכל עת ערב ובקר בצהריים חטוב כלכלו רחמך וחמרכם כלותמו חסדך מעולם קיווינו לך ועל כולם יתברך ויתרומם שמך מלכנו תמיד לעולם ועד וכל החיים ידעו חסלה וחלו את שמך באמת חלשתנו וזרתנו סלע ברוך אתה אדוני כתוב שמך על חנה לך דעת Shalom Rav Al Kadasim, Lalam Ki Atahu, Melech Adon Lechol HaShalom. V'tov b'necha l'varechet b'cha Israel, b'chol t'vchol shah b'shlemecha. Baruch atah Adonai, v'varechet b'mo Israel b'shalom. Yikol ratzon repi v'chigion l'bi l'fanecha natzri b'goli. That's a Rabbi Dinan's version.
That's the, oh, yeah. 252.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
B'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malkutei. V'chayichon v'yamichon v'chayet Yikol Beit Israel. V'agalav izman kariv v'yimru amen.
Amen. Yesh mei rabba mavodach li'olam l'meil maya.
Kesh mi Rabbi Mvarach l'amel me'al maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitramam v'yitnasei. V'yitadar v'yitchalal shmei Kudisha brichu.
Brichu.
Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tishbechata v'nechamata. Da'amiran b'alma v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Kesh lam Rabba min Shemai. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Israel v'yimru amen.
Amen.
V'aseh shalom b'mramav. V'yaseh shalom aleinu. V'al kol Israel v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Aleinu l'shabech l'adon hakol.
L'teis gedula
Yotzer b'reishit. Shalosh sanu kegoyech haratzot.
V'lo samanu k'mishpot adama. Shelo sam chelkeinu kohem. V'gohar aleinu k'chol hamonam. V'anachnu korim. ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. כמו גוש לך קילומטר בבקעת, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני מלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, וחיה אדוני, למלך על כל הארץ. ביום חפו, יהיה אדוני אחד. ושמו אחד. In a moment there'll be a Shiva Kaddish in memory of Galina Rosenberg by her son Alex. There'll be a Yortzeit Kaddish in memory of Max Edward Clyde by his son Wally. There'll be a Shloshim Kaddish in memory of Michael Cooper by his parents Sid and Lee and friends Nancy Kaplan and Bud Taman. A Shiva Kaddish in memory of Marilyn Lamb by her son Cliff. A Shloshim Kaddish. A Shloshim Kaddish in memory of Sally Miller by Sarah Lee and Bobby Jacobson and friend Bud Taman. And any other Shloshim? No. Kaddish. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabbah. V'alma divra kirusei v'amlich malkusei. V'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayet kol Beit Israel. Ba'galav izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mibarach l'olam le'olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitramam v'yitnasei. V'yitchadar v'yitaleh v'yichalal shmei Kudisha brichu. Leila min kol berchata v'shirata. Tush berchata v'nechamata. Da'amiran b'alma v'imru amen. V'chei shlam Rabba min Shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Israel v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav.
Uyaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Israel v'imru amen.
And in order to get the program, the Yom HaShoah program started on time, what we're going to do is we're going to go right to Marav. And this is the last Marav of Alex's Shiva. He's getting up tomorrow morning after Shacharis. And we all just want to say, Hamakom Yinachem Etchem B'Sok Sha'arvei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May you be comforted among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And we turn to 256 for Marav.
V'chura hu mekaper ahon v'lo yashkit v'charabala chashev apal v'lo ayir kol chamato. Adnai chashech hamelech hayenu v'yam kareinu. Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Li'olam Vo'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach L'olam Vayed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Ha'olam Asher B'dvaro Ma'ariv Aravim. El Chai V'Koyam Tamid Melech Aleinu L'olam Vayed. Baruch Atah Adonai Ha'ma'ariv Aravim.
Amen.
Achavat L'olam Beit Israel Amcha Chavtat Torat Mitzvot Chukim Mishpatim. כי חיים חיינו ויאריך ימינו ולכם נחגה ימם ולילה וחוותך תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני יוחאי עמו ישראל שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד ויד ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, וחיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך וחיו לטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. וחיים שמות שתיים. למען ירבו ימיכם וימיניכם על האדמה אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיכם לתת לכם כימי השמיים על הארץ. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליכם, ועשו לכם ציצית על כנפי בגדיכם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וריתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זנים אחריכם, למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. ואמונה כזאת וכיום עלינו כי כל מלכנו ואין זולתו, ואנחנו ישראל עמו. ומלכותיו רצון קיבלו עליך משה ובני ישראל לך אנושיר בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תפילות עושי פלא. מלכות אחריו ובניך בוקע ים לפני משה, זה אלי ענו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, כיפד אדוני את יעקב, וגלה מעט חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו שלום יקום ידינו מלכנו לחיים ופרס עלינו סוג שלומך. ושמור צאתנו והיינו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני שמר עמו ישראל לעד. ברוך אדוני לעולם אמן אמן. ברוך אדוני מצוין שכני ירושלים הללויה. כי המלכות שלך כעולמי תמלך בכבוד, כן לנו מלך אלעד, ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך בכבודו תמיד מלך עלינו, לעולם ועד ועל כל מעשיו.
Amen. Please rise.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה,
Amen.
ואלמד דברי קראתי וימליך מלכותי, וחיכון וימיכון וחיי, וכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן.
Amen. Yeh shmei rabba mevorach li'olam l'me'el maya.
שמי רב מברך לעולם על מעל מאיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרמם ויתנשא, ויתחדר ויתעלה ויתחלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה ושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Page 278.
יתקדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, וילמד דברה קראתי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובימיכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. כשמי רב ומברך לעולם על מי אלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתחדר ויתעלה ויתחלל שמי קודשה בריחו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. Islam Rabba min Shammai, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Israel v'imru amen.
Amen.
V'aseh shalom b'imramah, v'yaseh shalom aleinu, v'al kol Israel v'imru
Amen.
amen.
It's a little too early to count the Omer tonight. Last night's count of the Omer was 11 days. I have no idea what tonight's count will be. But perhaps a gentleman named Zachary Teller might be a good clue. Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'atei gidula l'yotzei breshit, shelo asanu koyeh haratzah, v'lo samanu kimekos adamon, shelo sam chelkeinu gohem, v'gor aleinu kechol havanon, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. כי חמגו שלך כי אלמייצים לבקוות, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, וחיה אדוני, למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
In a moment, there'll be a Shiva Kaddish in memory of Galina Rosenberg by her son Alex. There will be a Shloshim Kaddish in memory of Marilyn Lamb by her son Cliff. There'll be a Shloshim Kaddish in memory of Michael Cooper by his parents Lee and Sid and friends Nancy Kaplan and Bud Taman. There'll be a Shloshim Kaddish in memory of Sally Miller by Sarah Lee and Bobby Jacobson and Bud Taman. Hey Wally, is your father's yortzeit tonight or last night? Okay, tonight. So there's a yortzeit Kaddish in memory of Max Clyde by his son Wally. There's a Shloshim Kaddish in memory of Shlomo Levy by his nephew Ron Muckamal. And we remember our friends and congregants. Oh, Dr. Mark Kaplan, we're saying a Kaddish in memory of Dr. Mark Kaplan by his wife Nancy and good friend Bud Taman. And we remember Dr. Gedaliahu Lior, Eric Oppenheim. Let me go through this list. Sarah Edry by Elia Dari. Naomi Proper by her daughter. Sharon Hammeroff is Debbie with us, Debbie Jacobson, and they're also saying Kaddish for their sister, Susan Proper. Kaddish in memory of Irene Scher by her daughter, Mona Ehrenberg, and son, Steve. Kaddish in memory of Clara Rifkin by her son, Harry. And I think we've got everybody. And we're remembering Arnold Hyatt, Eileen Hotz, Annette Schoenfeld, Shirley Karp, Howard Kirk, Jay Pollack, Libby, David, is David here? Yeah, David is here. David Fram is saying Kaddish for Nate Silver and Reba Ashkenazi. And we remember Estelle Kahn, Bunny Bazensky, Howard Cohen, Lisa Sugarman, and Jerry Silverman. Yiskadal, Yiskadash, Shemei Rabba, V'yomar Divrat, V'yusei, V'yadif Malkusei, V'chayikon, V'yimekon, V'chayikon, Beis Yisrael, V'agolo V'zman Kariv, V'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba, V'borak, V'yom Amel Maya, Yitbarak, V'yistabak, V'yisbar, V'yistamam, V'yisnasei, V'yisadar, V'yisaleh, V'yisalah, Shmei Kusha, B'rechu, Leilo min kol berchosa v'shirasa, tush berchosa v'nechemasa, da'amiram b'yalma v'imru amen. Kei shlom rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'ramav, Yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al Yisrael v'imru amen. Turn to page 997. It's Psalm Tet Zion Special psalm for Shiva during the month of Nisan.
Michtam
Michtam
l'David Shomreinu el ki chasiti bach. Shavar simchat et panecha niimod biminecha netzach. Yishkadal vitkadash shemei rabah. Be'alma divrat virusei be'amliv malkusei. V'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayel kol beis Yisrael. V'agalam izman karibim ruamein. Yehi shmei rabba mivarach l'olam ha'el maya. Yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpoar v'yitramam v'yitnasei. Vitadar, Vitale, Vitalal, Shemei Kudusha, Brichu, Leila, Minko, Berchata, Mishirata, Tushbechata, Nefamata, Damiran, Bialma, Vibru, Amen. Keish Lama Rabba, Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu, V'al Israel, Vibru, Amen. Oseh Shalom, Vibramav, Uyaseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Israel, Vibru, Amen.
Yashikak to Alex, and we turn to 82. I got it. We'll turn to page 82 for a healing prayer for our good friend Howard Gersh, who we hope his eyes are getting better every day, and for Nancy Kaplan, and for Sandy Weinstein, and Anita Barron, and Arnie Begleiter, Rabbi Shapiro, Miguel Sadovnik, and all those in the congregation who could use some healing. Shir Hamalas mimamakim korasicha Adonai.
Shir Hamalas mimamakim korasicha Adonai.
Adonai shema b'kali ki yenes necha kishavos l'kol tachanunai.
Adonai shema b'kali ki yenes necha kishavos l'kol tachanunai.
Im avanos tishmar ya Adonai miyamod.
Adonai miyamod.
Ki imcha slicha l'mahan tivarei. Ki visi Adonai kivsana shiva lidvaro hochalti. Nafshi l'Adonai mishamrim laboker shomrim laboker. Yachel Yisrael el Adonai ki im Adonai achesed v'yarbei mofadu. Hu yiftes Yisrael mikol Yashikak to Alex, and thank you for everyone for being here. Tomorrow morning, Alex is getting up after morning minions, so those who can be there. Now, for those online here, if you go over to the Shul's website, mmae.org, and then you click on live stream, we're doing the Yom HaSoah service, and it's getting ready to start. Dara's going to set it up, and Barbara and whoever else is setting it up.
got you out by 7:30 though.
We did get you. Alex got you out by 7:30. So sei gesund, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Huh? Yeah, I'll lock up. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, he could do that. So David, you here for the program? Good. All right, so let me explain a couple things that just happened. Absolutely. So Alex is today's shift for this month. Held it past away last Friday. So, yeah, he'll be here. So, there's a custom state with a little song after the prayers. So he says it on the scotch. It turns out the prayer we normally say is going to shift us. Can't say it. So there's a different song, which is in the back of the book, instead of where it normally is. So we do that, and then morning service, night Who's online, who's here, and so I asked. And then at the end of the service, we do a healing. It's one of the songs. It's actually on page 82. the guy came over and I said, because I got in touch with Howard Brown, I said, do you remember where you got all this?
Yeah.
So he said, let me have the guy call you. So the guy calls, and he came over to measure, and I spoke to him the other day, and he said, well, I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna take these two posts out and re-put in the new posts, because these posts were cut. See, this post here was not cut. But if they would have put one on there, you'd have a big hole.
Yeah.
So they're gonna replace the post and put the, it's called a lamps tone.
Might have it cleaned up.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I'll be cleaning here and not talking here.
Connected, oh, Moses guest.
are you gonna reconnect automatically, is that, hopefully?
It takes a minute.
Wait a minute, I gotta plug this guy in.
Oh. Now, the rabbi reads first. Is it the other side? It should be okay.
Power on. Bluetooth pairing.
Now, if you want, we can put it on the Shulchan, if that'll be easier for
What's
you.
better? If this is
Well,
what we'll
it's,
read from, right?
if somebody's gonna read from here,
Then maybe we should. It'll
we'll
be
put
out of
this
the
over
way.
here, and what I can do is,
Okay, so this is just gonna be, if you could come up when I come up to do this with me. So Rabbi's gonna do his remarks first, and then light the candle remarks, and then he'll say something about Judy Gardner's story, and live stream is on, right?
live stream is on, let me ask Joan.
Oh, yeah.
She'll tell me.
I'll just leave this like this. I'm gonna go get a program, because I gave mine to the rabbi.
Oh, you know what? I don't need to do that. Oh, but I'm going to. Is the live stream on? Okay, thank you. All right, I'll talk to you later. All right, bye. Okay, so the live stream is on. Let me see if the rabbi's on his way in. Zalman suggested that you may want to count the Omer tonight. He gave the clue, but he said, but since you're doing a program, you might be able to do it. Yeah.
Please, everyone, silence your cell phones. The action was raging. A group of Jews huddled in an attic, among them Rabbi Aaron Perlow. Rabbi Perlow was known as a scholar, a violinist and a musician, and the sensitive, self-effacing son of the Stoliner Rebbe, the head of one of Lithuania's Hasidic groups. The cramped, dark attic in which the Jews were hiding had been arranged for them by Berla the Ganef. And if you had a name like Berla the Ganef back in the shtetl, it meant that you had been caught stealing. Berla had been caught more than once stealing. So he became known as Berla the Ganef. Ganef meaning thief in Yiddish. A crack in the wall of the attic afforded them a view of both the lower level of the house in which they hid and the entrance area to the building. A few days into the action, Reb Aaron and the others noticed a terrified pregnant woman running into the building looking for a place to hide, with a Nazi just behind her. They watched as she fell, her body thudding to the ground. The Nazi cocked his rifle, aiming it directly at her. Rabbi Perlow leaped up and reached for the door. The others tried to stop him from leaving, pleading with him that he could do no good. The Nazi would simply kill them both and possibly discover their hideout. "Jews," he yelled at them, "how can we sit by while a Jewish woman is in danger?" And so the soft-spoken rabbi ran out of the attic, roaring at the Nazi, "Murderer! Is your heart made of stone? Don't you have a mother of your own?" The Nazi, shocked by the sight of the man in full Hasidic garb shouting at him, initially turned to run from the building. But then he twisted back and began to fire his gun furiously, repeatedly, mechanically, mortally wounding both the woman and Rabbi Perlow, and then turned and stormed out the door. The woman died quickly, but Rabbi Perlow was shuddering in agony from his wounds. And he raised a clenched fist and he whispered, "Berla, Berla, Berla the Ganef," who joined him by his side. "Say Vidoy with me. Bring my violin and play me the nigun, the song that I had begun to teach you." Berla the Ganef raced to get the violin as Rabbi Perlow lay in a growing pool of his own blood. Berla Ganef played the melody. He cried and played, the music mingling with the screams of Rabbi Perlow's wife. He played until the rabbi's eyes finally closed. And then Berla fell to the ground, clutching the holy man's body. "Rebbe, I was a thief, but I have a good heart, and I swear on your body, on your holy soul, Rabbi, that I will continue your song. I will continue your nigun." In preparing for this occasion, it crossed my mind to think about the community rabbis who served their communities during the Holocaust. Something I had never really wrapped my head around when I fetch about how difficult it is to be with people in their very difficult times. But could you imagine being the rabbi of a community as you were placed in cattle cars and taken to Auschwitz? What do you tell your congregants? What do you do to be there for them? Thousands and thousands of rabbis were tasked with this very, very difficult moment in their lives. What would I have done? As a rabbi, I have a very difficult task. The task is to continue to believe in a good God, a benevolent God, a God that is in total control of the universe and the world, and yet, at the same time, hold in my mind the reality that there was a Holocaust, that 6 million of my people were slaughtered along with other peoples. And Jewish people are no strangers to persecution. This has been something that has gone on throughout Jewish history. And so that's not new. We've always stayed strong. We've always continued to make the bracha, Baruch Dayan Ha'emes. Blessed is the righteous judge. But never, never before on this kind of scale and brutality. Never before. We are less than a century out. But I believe and I hope with all my heart that we will continue to honor them and remember the pain of the Holocaust hundreds of years from today. And so we come together because we've promised to never forget. I won't be in control of what happens 100 years from now. But I promise to keep the song going. I promise to never forget. It's a promise that guides my behavior in terms of the way I raise my children, how I teach them it's important to be a Jew. It guides my behavior in terms of having mercy on others and never being cruel. We are also promising to honor the memories of those who were killed and those who survived. Sometimes it was unclear which ones had the better outcome. I know of people who went through the worst hell and had to hold that with them the rest of their lives, living in pain. But at least they were alive. At least they were able to have children. At least they were able to pass down their life to the next generation. But for the millions of children, the over 1 million children who were blotted out, who will never be remembered because their parents are gone, and they were gone before they could have children to remember them. Who's going to honor their memories? Who's going to think about them when they say Kaddish? Who's going to honor the memory of the 6 million? That's us. That is us. And so that affects the way we act. It affects the way we carry ourselves. our moments matter because we're living each moment for us and for a victim of the Holocaust. And finally, we promise to pass their stories to the next generation. We are quickly coming to the end of the period of survivors. And indeed, today, the stories will be told by the children of survivors. But that doesn't mean that their stories will be lost. If anything, we are more committed to crystallizing those stories, to making them stories that are told, and told well and beautifully, so that the poignant knowledge of what happened is not lost, and so that people don't take it lightly. Because as we all know, stories have a big effect, the biggest effect on people. And so that's why we're here tonight, to tell their stories, to honor them, and to never forget. We're now going to tell Judy Gartner's family story.
Apologies.
There you go. Go to the next one.
Yeah, we're gonna start with the next one. Apologies for troubleshoot this.
Jane Walsh's family. Go to the next one.
We're going to tell Jane Walsh's family story, presented by Paulette Pollock.
When Rabbi Shapiro asked if we knew anyone who was a survivor, I had a thought, and the thought was that thank goodness my family are all safe and secure, and our family never had to deal with the Holocaust. But I, as a person, has been very fortunate to have been able to meet and deal with a Schindler survivor. The gentleman who had the book written, who was his heart's desire to have it told to the whole world, was a gentleman whose name was really Leopold Pfefferberg. He changed it to Leopold Page in the United States. He and his wife were the couple in Schindler's, the film that escaped. He was instrumental in getting Thomas Keneally. He convinced him to write the story because it was his whole life's desire to tell Schindler's story. So together, the two of them were able to write the book, and from Mr. Page's connections with Steven Spielberg, after many years they were able to get the film produced. And I was very fortunate to strike up a friendship with the Pages. We went to California to visit them, and I had a very wonderful relationship with these very special people. In addition to that, for those of you who probably know, my brother retired, and he made it his desire to go to Poland to try to combat some anti-Semitism, and he created an organization called the Polish Jewish Alliance for Youth Action to combat anti-Semitism, to recognize the righteous Gentiles that are listed in Yad Vashem and are from Poland, to acknowledge them and to honor them for what they did for the Jewish world. He was involved with the March of the Living. I've got lots and lots of stories, so if anybody wants to ever hear the rest of all of those stories, please just ask me. I'd be glad to tell you, because I've been very fortunate to have those experiences. And I feel very privileged to be able to read this letter from Jane West Walsh about her family. It goes. If I pronounce a couple names wrong, please understand. My grandfather, Chaim Forstatter, and his wife, Bela Malki, and Chaim's brother, Isaac Forstatter, were born in Lublin. They came to America in the early years of the 20th century, around 1905. I was born in 1952. Our family never talked about Poland or the family there. There were no photographs of Polish days or the people that had been left behind. I actually never met my grandfather's brother, so I assumed that we never lost anyone in the Holocaust. Whenever I studied and taught about the Holocaust, visited Yad Vashem or the museum in D.C., read memories, listened to eyewitnesses' accounts, or saw films, I would think about how fortunate I was that my grandfather came to America so long ago. I knew that I was lucky. My cousin, Mark Forstatter, was researching our family and took a trip to Lublin. There he met a community of friends who planned to start a theater, but instead got involved in researching and creating a memorial to the Jewish community that was erased during the Holocaust. They were not Jews. They told him they learned that Lublin was built over the area where the Jewish community had been. They compared it to the idea of the lost city of Atlantis. And although they had never wanted to create a theater instead of a museum, they realized that using their theater space to illuminate what they learned about the Jewish community and its lost culture was more important. Using old city records, they were able to recover names and histories of families and businesses and schools that had been there and are now gone. My cousin asked their new friends to research our family. They did. And while they found a book in the museum shop that was Rudolf Retter's account of what happened in Belzec and how he escaped. He was the sole survivor. Mark read it, and it changed everything. Mark published a memoir about what he learned about Belzec, Mondanik, and shared with me a document of our family's genealogy that dates back to 1795 in Lublin. In his memoirs, he republished Rudolf Retter's account as well. I just read it. Lublin was a key point on the Lublin-Lvov rail spur that delivered our people to Mondanik and Belzec. My grandfather and his brother were part of a huge Jewish family. Now I know that Belzec and Mondanik are where so many of my relatives, the ones that I have never known existed, died. Jane West Walsh. And it's been my privilege to be able to read that. Thank you.
Now Judy Gartner's family story.
Power on. Bluetooth pairing.
Charles is the son of my father's sister, Matilda. In the 1930s, when things were getting bad in Germany, Matilda decided to go to Hungary. She fell in love and married and stayed in Hungary. My father, a few years later, in December 1937, was able to emigrate to the United States. My father's parents were never able to get out of Germany and died in the Holocaust. Now let me give you Charles's presentation. I am Charles Fodor, and I am a Holocaust survivor. The war started in Poland in 1939, but the war did not arrive to Hungary until 1941. From 1941 until the end of the war, my father served in a forced labor battalion. He was guarded by soldiers with bayonets while he was building roads and bridges at the Russian front. When the Hungarians attempted to make a separate peace with the Allies, the Germans marched in and occupied Hungary on March 19, 1944. The first thing that happened when the Nazis invaded Hungary is that we had to wear the yellow star. In less than a year, we went from wearing the yellow star to yellow star designated houses to safe houses or to deportation or to the ghetto and finally liberation. By July 1944, my mother and I had to move in with my grandmother because the building where she lived was designated as a Yellow Star apartment house. All the Jewish residents' names were posted at the gate, so the Nazis knew where to find people. The gate was always locked, and we were only allowed outside from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. By then, the grocery store shelves were empty. The Germans established a Jewish council. Some of the Jewish leaders, like lawyers, were liquidated. We had no telephones, or radios, or television. No communication with the outside world. We were shut-ins. On November 11th, my mother was taken away for labor. I still remember there was a Hungarian policeman and a uniformed Hungarian fascist militiaman. I asked my mother to take me with her. The policeman said, "We do not take children today." My mother said, "Be a good boy," and she was gone. I never saw her again. I was 8 years old. During this time, the 4 neutral embassies, the Swiss, Swedes, Spanish, and Portuguese, tried to save the remnants of the Jews by issuing them a Schutzpasse, or protective letter, which said that we were under their protection. They also had apartment houses under their protection. My grandparents and I had such letters. On the 15th of November, together with my grandmother, I took a streetcar toward one of these safe houses. We got off just before the Danube River and walked. We were stopped by 4 Hungarian fascist militia women and ordered into an apartment building. As we walked into the courtyard of the building, we saw someone bending over at the entrance to the basement, and we did not know what he did. Another man was coming towards us. He grabbed my grandmother and me, saying, "You don't belong in here," and escorted us out of the building another way, away from the fascist militia woman and around the block, and then saying, "Get lost." Because of him, I'm alive today. I wonder who he was. A man with God in his heart to save the lives of 2 human beings. We learned later that all the Jews caught in the web of the Hungarian fascist militia were taken out to the Danube after nightfall and shot into the river. The man we saw bending over was taking valuables from the Jews who were there. My grandmother and I made it to the safe house where we stayed for a few weeks. By the early part of December, the Hungarian fascists did not accept our letters of embassy protection, and soldiers with bayonets escorted us into the Budapest ghetto. At some point, the Hungarian Nazis wanted to blow up the ghetto, but they ran out of time. The Russians were very close, and we could hear the thunder of their heavy artillery. Toward the end of the war, we were starving. My grandmother found a rotten potato, which she cooked into soup, and we lived on it for a few days. Soon after that, we had to move into the basement with other starving Jews. The war was just above us from house to house. On January 18, 1945, a Russian soldier burst into the basement shouting out, "Nemsky, Nemsky! Germans, Germans!" looking for hiding German soldiers. One of the residents spoke to him in Yiddish. "There are no Germans here, only Jews." The Russian soldier spoke more softly, saying, "You are liberated and free to go." My father returned 4 days later. He escaped from the Hungarians, was caught by the Russians, and escaped again. We recently learned from Yad Vashem, the Israeli Holocaust Museum, that my maternal grandparents were taken to Terezin in 1942. From there, they were taken to Treblinka and gassed. My mother never returned. I was 8 years old. Today, if you visit Hungary as a tourist, you will see on the Pest side of the Danube River, just south of the Parliament building, about 60 cast iron shoes as a remembrance of those who were shot in the Danube River in late 1945 and 1945. The Nazis took the Jews out to the river, made them take their shoes off, and shot them into the river. Some of those shoes could have been mine. But I was saved by a man who cared for all humanity by saving 2 human lives. Some time ago, I was asked what I brought out of the Holocaust to pass on to the next generation. First, life is most precious. 2, whatever food sustains life is kosher. 3, do a mitzvah, a good deed, each day to thank God for the gift of life. 4, all humans are our brothers and sisters. We are one human family, and we need to take care of each other. 5, never forget. Thanks for listening to me. That's it. Johnny Mercer.
I now want to invite Barbara Strauss to tell her father's story, as well as the story of Carmi Grossman's mother.
Before I begin my father's story, I would like to tell you about a conversation that I had with a congregant while preparing for this program. The congregant and I were discussing how this event was going to work. I said we want to hear stories of our shul's family members that survived the Holocaust. She then said my relative was not in a camp. Does that mean that he is not a survivor? I said, no. If there were Jews that were lucky enough to flee the Nazis, they were survivors. My father was born Siegfried Rath on July 12, 1924, to Wolf and Basia Rath. They lived in East Germany in a town called Chemnitz, which is now called Karl-Marxstadt. He had an older sister named Celie, and some years later, a brother named Manfred. The story that I will be telling you comes not just from my memory, but from an interview that was done with my father by a woman named Helen Collins from the Jewish Museum of Maryland on March 5th, 1981. Most of this story will be from my father's own words that were typed after this interview. This begins my father's words. In 1934, after Hitler had been in power for 2 years or so, my parents must have had foresight of what events were going to take place in Germany. And they registered me with an organization called European Jewish Children Aid Society, which later became HIAS. By the time my father, these are my words, by the time my father was 10 years old, he had seen and experienced numerous Nazi atrocities. He states, "I was the only Jewish child in my grammar school. We had outdoor gym during the winter of 1934, and my teacher had become an avid Nazi. As we were playing outside in the snow, he encouraged the kids to gang up on me. We had a snowball battle where I was the only target, and I was soaked through and through with snow. I asked permission to go home and change my clothes, but the teacher said, a good Nazi youth doesn't do that. Therefore, I had to stay in school all day, and later I became ill with double pneumonia. It grew worse, and medical attention was not readily available to us. I remember that I was becoming delirious. Finally, my parents called an ambulance. They took us to several hospitals because none of them would allow a Jewish patient. Finally, I was admitted at a city or a public hospital. I did miraculously recover. My father had lost his business by this time due to the Nazis. He tried to work many jobs as he could, but there was never enough money for food or anything else. We had a soup kitchen in our town, and I was fortunate enough, through manipulations, to have 2 soup tickets to 2 soup kitchens in 2 different neighborhoods. We finished school midday, and I would run with my little tin pail and line up in the neighborhood kitchen. First in line, I would eat the soup, which tasted like cream of wheat with artificial flavoring, vanilla, very sweet. I would eat that hurriedly and then run on to the next neighborhood and get into the end of that line. I've always been a big eater, and that was the way I got to eat 2 meals. I had a very happy childhood, and I had lots of neighborhood friends. The problem started before 1933, when it already looked like the National Socialist Party, the Nazis, had already started to agitate people in our city. My friends, who had been friends one day, certainly had joined the Nazi youth movement. And all of a sudden, they would turn on me because I was the only Jew in the neighborhood group. My brother had a worse experience. He was there 2 years after I left Germany. The persecutions had intensified. He would not be able to walk to school by himself. My father told us that when he was still in Germany, he and his brother would walk to school together. The Nazi youth would throw stones and call them dirty Jews. Back to my father's words. My father had to walk with my brother, and my brother had to sit in the back of the classroom. If any of the kids in the class misbehaved, he was always the one they punished. It got to the point where my brother could not even go to school anymore. It was to the point that he was a very frightened little animal. The Nazis would be parading up and down the street, and they would beat up on Jews. My father used to belong to a men's club where they would gather for drink and conversation. The Nazis would raid the place and beat up whomever they could. My father was fortunately able to escape any of these happenings. He would help the other Jewish men as he could. He had been the leader of the Jewish community and had served in the German army. We would see men being forced to scrub walls of buildings where there were anti-Nazi slogans. My father said that a lot of times he would fight back when being attacked. You hear so much of the little resistance that was shown. It is interesting to know that even in a small measure, people were doing something. Everyone still thought this was a passing thing. All my life since then, I thought, how could we ever let ourselves be led to slaughter? And that there was no resistance, except that when you are up against guns and tanks, there is little you can do. Then we heard from the European Children's Aid Society. Back to me. My father was asked to go to Berlin to the American consulate, where there were a group of 40 children gathered. A social worker gathered the children together. The next day, they read off the names of the children who had received their visas. My father was one of the lucky ones. He was the only one from his city that had applied. His brother was too young, and his sister was too old. He was taken by a social worker, having to say goodbye to the family in hopes that he would someday reunite. He was taken to Bremen, where they boarded the ship, the SS Manhattan. They were put in third or fourth class with 5 to a cabin. There were rumors on the ship that these children were to become foster children. When they landed in New York, my father and another young man, aged 15 or 16, were taken to a refugee family in Brooklyn, New York. The family had come out of Germany a year or two before. They were given a stipend of $300 a year for each child they took in. The very next day, they were taken to school. They were in a classroom of 30 children from all different nationalities. My father was taken to the Lower East Side one day, to the Jewish Community Center, and was outfitted with hand-me-down clothes. After a few months, they were told too many Jewish children in New York. So my father and the other young man were put on a train and sent to Baltimore. When they arrived, a social worker from Hayes took them to a family where there were 2 other German children. They only stayed about 2 to 3 weeks, and then my dad was sent to Camp Airy. As he said, this was the first time I sat down and cried. Here were 200 to 300 boys, all Americans. I was by myself, sitting on a little satchel. My dad enjoyed camp and was taken under the wings of some of the boys. He learned English, but most of it was cuss words and slang words. Dad was taken to Camp Louise, the sister camp, if you don't know, one day by the social worker, and he was introduced to a man named Meyer Strauss. They spoke a few words of German, and then my dad was taken back to camp and thought nothing of it. After camp, there weren't any homes available for my dad, so the social worker took him in to her home to stay. The social worker's children and the neighborhood children here in Baltimore were very kind to him. Finally, one day, the social worker asked my father if he would like to go live with the man, Meyer Strauss, that he had met at camp. At the age of 11, he was taken to the home of Julia and Meyer Strauss. The Strausses had no children and had become very involved in helping refugees. They had brought so many refugees, and Meyer had given so many affidavits that the State Department had him come to Washington to be interviewed to make sure that these refugees would not become a ward of the U.S. My father had asked Julia if they could bring his brother, and they did in 1937. When his brother came, he was a beaten young child. He was so fearful that he would hide under furniture if someone came in the room. Fred, Dad's brother, was not able to handle conditions in Germany since things had gotten much worse after my father came. Fred spoke very little and was only 8 when he came. My father joined the Strausses at Shereth, Israel, and was bar mitzvahed there. Both the boys were told to continue writing to their family, and they did receive letters back. My dad said it was very difficult to write to his natural parents because he was living with people that he thought were his parents. The Strausses encouraged him and Fred to write, thinking that they may someday reunite. The letters suddenly stopped. Julia and Meyer did everything they could to find out what happened, to no avail. The boys were adopted by the Strausses on February 21st, 1942. They took on the names Siggy and Fred to shorten their names. I want to share one part of history of this story that is amazing. After my father and Fred were with the Strausses for a while, they had a visit from a third cousin of Julia's. Their names were Moses and Helen Rosenfeld. The children were Lucille and Betsy. My father remembered the visit, but didn't think anything of it. He was too young to think about women then. In 1947, my father had come home from serving in the United States Army, where he was a lieutenant and a special investigator of war crimes in Germany. There were lots of stories about that. He was at Suburban Club one evening, and he noticed, as he said, a beautiful woman. He went up to the woman and introduced himself to Lucille Rosenfeld, the cousin of his adoptive mother. They had a short courtship and were married in 1951. So there's a very big intertwining of the families, but not by blood. In 1961, my father put an ad in a German Jewish paper in New York. People were doing this to try to find their families from the Holocaust. My father got a response from a woman who had seen my grandmother, Basia Rath, and my aunt, Celie Rath, being pushed into a cattle car. My father was never able to find out any other information about the family. Around Thanksgiving this past year, my older sister, who lives in New York, was contacted by a man named Matt Stein. He had done some research on his family and realized he was related to some of the Rath family. He was able to send many documents, 3 of which showed that Wolf, Basia, and Celie were murdered. To end, I must include something my father said that has helped me become who I am today. In my father's words, I would like anyone who listens to this to understand that I was one of few fortunate people in the world who suffered through a terrible period in my life. Then I was taken in by a family, adopted by a family, who had the sensibility and kindness to make me what I am today. I feel a certain sense of gratitude, certainly, but I also feel that I would like to pay back what I reaped to the Jewish community, and that he did. My father served on the board of Jewish Community Relations Council, the Jewish Historical Society of Maryland, vice president of the Jewish National Fund, president of the President's Council of Synagogues, board member and vice president of the Seaboard region of the United States of America, board member of the United Synagogue National Academy of Adult Jewish Studies, board member of National Ramah Committees, board member of the United Synagogue of America, board member, treasurer, founding member of Merkaz, the Zionist organization of the conservative movement, board member of the World Council of Synagogues, president of Chizuk Emunah congregation. He organized and founded the Bar Mitzvah Brotherhood of Chizuk Emunah, and 2 of our congregants were part of that Brotherhood Bar Mitzvah group. They are Randy Gartner and Alan Levin. I know that my father did make an impact on many people while giving back to the Jewish community. Never again. Never again. Thank you. I'm now going to continue with the story of Carmi Grossman's mother. Ahuva Grossman was born on February 27th, 1924. She was born in the village of Jaso in Slovakia. Ahuva grew up in a nice 3-bedroom home, large courtyard, and agricultural land that was used for agriculture. They had chickens, cows, geese, and different crops. Part of the wheat, barley, and oats used to feed the animals, and the rest would be taken to the market to be sold. Shabbos was celebrated with Carmi's grandfather going to the synagogue, and the family would read books and spend time together. Whatever work needed to be done was done by non-Jews. Ahuva said she had a happy childhood and a wonderful experience until the age of 11, when her mother died. She studied in high school till 1939. After that, Jews were not allowed to study. All the Jews of Slovakia were evicted. At that time, Ahuva was working with a seamstress as an apprentice. The family's home had been partitioned off to Hungary. The Nazis did not take over Hungary until 1944, so the family did live peacefully until the Nazis came. At the age of 19, Ahuva decided that she was going to start working. She worked for a family helping to care for their 5-year-old boy who needed special care. The job was over 300 miles from home. One day she was called back home. While she was there, 3 officers walked into the house and told the family to take some clothes, food, and to go with them. They were brought to a main square, and from there they were taken to a train. The train took them to the city of Kashi, where they were taken to a house that was filled with many other families. It was very crowded and conditions were terrible. They were transferred from their private home into a large brick factory. They had nothing to sleep on but a hard, cold floor. From there, they were packed into a freight train without food or water and traveled until they reached Auschwitz. As the doors opened, everyone was immediately separated: men, women, children, and old people. Ahuva did not even have time to say goodbye to her family. Quickly, she was marching with other young women to a shower room where they were told to undress. After the shower, each person was given a coverall in exchange for all other clothes. They were also given shoes that had been dipped in some sanitizing agent. Then on to the ceremony of head and body shaving, while armed soldiers watched. They were taken to a block, 22 was the number, and each was assigned to boards to sleep on. No blankets, no matting. All the work that they were told to do was to stand outside for 8 hours a day. Every morning, they were given a cup of coffee and a slice of bread, which was made with a large amount of sawdust. Every 6 weeks, they were taken for disinfection, standing nude and waiting to have all their hair shaven off again. The process was done by men. Ahuva said, even animals deserved more respect. This continued until Ahuva became sick and was taken to the hospital. Luckily, she was taken care of by a Jewish doctor. When she became well after the hospital, she was chosen with hundreds of other women and taken to a hall. They were given shirts, socks, and even underwear. The women were put on a train with real seats and taken to the city of Tlipsa. They were to fill bombs with explosive material that poisoned most of them. Ahuva drank only milk for 3 days, and this would, in her words, fix me up until the next time. They were fed nourishing food, and Ahuva gained rapidly in strength and health. One night in February of 1945, they were eating their night meal and heard an explosion. One of the workers caused the explosion in order to delay the manufacturing of the bombs. They did not go back to the bomb factory, but were made to dig trenches. The Wehrmacht guarded them and were more humane than the SS. They were then able to hear Allied planes dropping their bombs. They were targeting railway lines and larger cities. This continued until the 7th of May, 1945. On the 8th, the guards told them that they were going for a walk. They had no idea where they were going, but continued for an hour. They arrived at Theresienstadt camp. The first thing she saw was a large red cross at the entrance to the camp, and where nurses were waiting to attend to them. At this time, you can imagine, Ahuva was confused, distraught, and unable to decide what to do next. So many of her years, she was told what to do and when to do it. She was told by a man she recognized to leave the camp as soon as possible. This was because of all of the sicknesses and problems that they were having after the war. Ahuva waited till nightfall and got on a train that was pulling boxcars for animals. She found a small corner to sit down and decided to go back to her home. As we know, most of the Jewish homes were taken over by non-Jews. When Ahuva reached her home, she realized it was no longer hers. She had been given a little money by a Jewish man from the next village. He advised her to go to the Jewish agency in town. When she approached the building, there was a group of Jewish immigrants that were being organized to go to Palestine. At this time, Ahuva realized that the possibility of any of her family still left was gone. Ahuva joined the other immigrants and left for Israel. After surviving everything she did, Ahuva was to make a new life in the Promised Land. She is still alive today at the age of 97. Never again, never again. Thank you.
And now we're going to hear the story of Morris Rosen, presented by Dara Schechter.
Morris Rosen died this past December 12th at the age of 98. He raised his family and lived in a house just up the hill here on Pheasant Cross. I met Morris when I was a tracing coordinator at the Holocaust and War Victims Tracing Center. He would come in to see his survivor friends, and he did translations of documents for us. We talked whenever he came in. Every conversation had the potential to last for hours. As Morris said, if I talked a whole week, it still wouldn't be enough because I remember everything. After the war, Morris had come to Baltimore since he had a brother here. He married a Baltimore girl, Miriam Miller, built a successful painting business, and raised 2 sons with Miriam, one of whom married and had 2 children of his own. Morris collected Holocaust artifacts, especially postcards from ghettos and stamps. He was a well-known stamp collector, particularly of Olympic stamps, and was invited to several Olympics on the basis of his collection. Morris was devoted to preserving memory of the Holocaust. He was present at the 1993 dedication of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C. He told me it was a rainy and unusually cold day for the month of April, and as was Morris's custom, he pushed his way up to the front. The survivors there were all cold, and they all took their programs and papers and lined their coats with them for extra warmth. From Morris's 70s to his early 90s, he volunteered at the museum twice a week, driving from his home here to take the metro from Mount Washington to Penn Station, then the train to DC, then the DC Metro to near the museum, and then a 5-block walk. Morris said, "The museum still needs me in their archives where I do the translations. I do the most difficult of which are Polish written in Hebrew letters." Morris was a speaker for the Holocaust Museum and the BJC, and he told his story to countless students and gatherings. Morris was not tall. He was strong and lean, though, and looked physically the picture of himself as a young man. His physical strength and stamina surpassed many people decades younger, like me. He would tell me, this weekend I'm going to move these azaleas from here over here, and they were enormous, and he would do it. Or I'm going to paint the inside of my house before Pesach, or I'm really cutting back on my exercise. I'm just doing Zumba and kickboxing at LifeBridge twice a week now. He was amazing. He went to Minyan daily. He had an eternal glint in his eyes that were always smiling, a bit mischievously, but to me also seemed to be waiting for an answer somehow. I think now of the many times I would bump into Morris in the aisles of 7 Mile when my kids were young and I needed to get home and was in a rush. I wish I had stayed longer and listened harder. So now I'll tell you about Morris. Morris was born Moniek Rosen, with a Z, on November 10, 1922 in Częstochowa, Poland, and grew up in Dąbrowa Górnicza. He was the son of Jakob Rosen and Jakob's second wife, Golda Chaya Warszawska. Moniek was the oldest of 3 children. He had a younger brother, Josek, born in 1924, and a sister, Bluma, born 1926. He also had 8 older half-brothers and half-sisters from his father's first marriage. His wife, Pola, had died at age 44 in 1919, the same year her last child was born. There was Yechel, born in 1910, Leosha, born in 1911, Reuben, born in 1912, Roshka, born in 1913. Do you get the idea here? Israel, born in 1914. Then Rusha, born in 1915, Sala, born in 1917, and Tamara, born in 1919. Moniek attended both public and Jewish schools, and his father hoped that one day he would become a rabbi. Even before the Nazis invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, organized anti-Semitism was increasing in Poland and in Dąbrowa, his hometown. In 1938, a boycott of Jakob Rosen's general store put it out of business. After the Germans took over Poland, the Rosen family stayed, but Moniek, 17 years old then, fled east. When he encountered German troops near the Vistula River, he returned to his hometown, Dąbrowa. He found it a changed town. The Germans had murdered many Jews already, taken many for forced labor, and confiscated Jewish property. By early 1942, Dąbrowa had become a ghetto. Nazi roundups of Jews for deportation were becoming frequent, and Moniek often hid on the weekends in an abandoned police station. Then in early May, there was a large-scale roundup of females aged 13 to 30. Over 450 young women were deported, including Moniek's 16-year-old sister Bluma. She was sent to the labor camp Grunberg in Lower Silesia. On August 12th, German officials ordered the remaining Jews to gather in a field for new identity cards. Several thousand, including Moniek's parents Jakob and Golda, were deported to Auschwitz, where they were gassed on arrival. At the time of their parents' deportation, Moniek and 2 of his brothers, Shrulik and Josek, were at the Mittelstrasse labor camp near Dąbrowa. They worked as carpenters, bricklayers, and painters. Then in October 1942, Moniek was transferred to the Szaszkowa labor camp, where he worked in a leather workshop. A year later, he went to Sosnowiec, which was a sub-camp of Auschwitz, then Annaberg, which was a sub-camp of Buchenwald. The SS officer in that camp, by the name of Ludwig, was feared by everyone. One day, he lined up a group of the men, including Moniek, and asked if there was a painter among them. Although Moniek had laid bricks and painted in Mittelstrasse, he did not open his mouth out of fear. Then his friend Ehrlich said, "Rosen's a painter." Ludwig came to Moniek and hit him hard in the face, knocking him down for not saying he was a painter. He then dismissed everyone but Moniek, who had to stand there for hours. Finally, Ludwig returned with 2 other SS men and said, "There are 3 rooms to paint. I'll give you 3 days." He put a pistol to his head and said, "If you're not done by then, you've lived enough." Moniek completed the job, and after 4 weeks painting for Ludwig, Ludwig told Morris, "Well, you're not going to Auschwitz. Pick where you want to go. Moniek said, send me to Gruenberg, where he knew that his sister was. So he was sent there, and he stayed until April 1944, when he was transferred to yet another camp, Kretschenberg. Then, in February 45, Russian forces approached the camp, and the Germans suddenly evacuated the camp's inmates so they could flee from the advancing Russian army. All of the inmates were forced to march on foot in what became known colloquially as death marches, a death march. 6 weeks of walking on foot, and in late March 1945, they arrived at Buchenwald in Germany. Moniek remembered the mounds of bodies throughout the camp, the starvation, and the disease. In April, he was transferred again, this time by train, because the American forces were approaching. Many people died on the train, and those who didn't, he said, laid on the bodies of the dead just to keep warm to increase their chances of surviving. As the train entered one area, it started being bombarded by Russian planes, and everything around the train was in flames. Moniek thought, I'm not afraid to die. At least I've seen the way it's going for Germany. He saw more bombs. He said the Shema and braced himself, but the bombs struck elsewhere. The attack, however, had left the train disabled, so again, another march on foot for 2 weeks, and this led them to Theresienstadt. In early May 1945, as the war was coming to an end, Theresienstadt was liberated by the Russians. Moniek weighed 80 pounds. The only time I myself heard Morris cry was when he described in an interview looking up and seeing the Russian soldier in front of him who said he was free. The Red Cross arrived in Theresienstadt, and they took survivors' names, their hometowns, other information, and broadcast it so that hopefully surviving family members could hear these names and go find their loved ones. Shabtai Klugman, Morris's brother-in-law, heard Moniek's name and came to Theresienstadt for him and got him out. They learned that Lyosha, Shabtai's wife and Morris's sister, had died during the death march just a few days before. They traveled around Czechoslovakia and Austria searching for relatives, and Moniek wanted to go back to Dombrova, his hometown. He was waiting to board a train to go there, but someone yelled to him, don't go, they're killing Jews there. So after locating surviving siblings, he went to live at what was called the New Palestine Displaced Persons Camp near Salzburg, Austria. After several years in DP camps, he immigrated to the US and settled in Baltimore. In 1949, Moniek was 2 months shy of age 27. On September 1st, 1939, when war had broken out, he was 2 months shy of 17. Of his 10 siblings, 5 survived. Reuben, who had moved to Palestine before the war and then to Baltimore, Bluma, Israel, Yosek, and Roshka. Moniek lost his other 5 siblings, Lyosha, Rusha, Sala, Tamara, and Yechiel. He lost his parents, Yaakov and Golda, many nieces and nephews, sister and brother-in-laws, uncles, aunts, and many other members of his family. Thank you for listening to his story. I'll miss him. I can, yes. So now we are going to hear, I'm going to give a brief introduction, a song which is very famous among survivors, that was written in and is customarily sung in Yiddish. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the song so you have some context. The song is, the short version of the title is Zog nit kein Mol. And the lyrics to it, the partisan song, were written in 1942 by a poet and partisan named Hirsch Glick. He put the poem to the melody of a march tune, which in 1938 had been composed for the Soviet cinema by 2 Jewish composer brothers from Kiev, Daniil and Dmitry Pokras. Hirsch Glick was born in Vilna, then a part of Poland, now Lithuania, in 1922. He began to write Yiddish poetry in his teens. After the Nazis invaded Lithuania in 1941, he was put in the Rzhezha labor camp, where he continued to write poetry despite the conditions. He was later deported to the Vilna ghetto And there he participated in the artistic community, and he was an active resistance fighter. In April 1943, inspired by the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, he wrote this song. And the song grew very quickly in popularity beyond the ghetto and became the anthem of Jewish partisans and then of Jewish survivors. In October 1943, the Vilna ghetto was being liquidated, and he was captured as he tried to escape and deported to a concentration camp in Estonia. He escaped from there to the surrounding forest with 40 other prisoners in July 1944 and joined the partisans. But they were all killed in combat with the Nazis in August 1944. And now Steve Greenfield will be singing the song in Yiddish, and then Marcia Greenfield will be reading the English lyrics after.
Sag nicht kein Mal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg. Gott Himmel und Lehne verstehen und Pläuge Tage. Kommen wir durch unsere ausgebende Show. Es wird erpeugt von unseres Rot sehen do. Kommen wir noch unsere ausgebende Show. Es wird erpeugt von unseres Rot sehen do. Von grünen Pommerland bis Wiesenland von Schnee. Wir kommen nun mit unserer Pein, mit unserer Weh. Und wo gefehn sie soll Spritz von unser Blut. Sprossen wird dort unser Gewurre, unser Mut. Und wo gefehn sie soll Spritz von unser Blut. Spritz wird dort unser Gewurre, unser Mut. Es wird die Morgensonne vergilden uns dem Heint. Und der Nächten weht verschwinden mit Feinden. Der Räume versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor. Wie a Parol soll gehen das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Der Räume versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor. Wie a Parol soll gehen das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Sie sind not kein Little von a Vogel auf der Frei. Das hat a Volk zwischen Feindig gewend. Das Lied gesungen mit na Gannes in der Hand. Das hat a Volk zwischen Feindig gewend. Das Lied gesungen mit na Gannes in der Hand. Die sagen nicht kein Mal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg. Gott Himmel, bleiben verstehen, bei Tage, kommen wir noch unsere ausgebende Show. Es wird abheugt von unser Trott, wir sehen um. Kommen wir noch unsere ausgebende Show. Es wird abheugt unser Trott, wir sehen um.
Sometimes Steve's a hard act to follow. The English translation of this particular partisan song is "Do not ever say." Never say you are going on your final road, although leaden skies block out our blue days. Our longed-for hours will yet come. Our step will beat out. We are here. From a land of green palm trees to the white land of snow, we arrive with our pain, with our woe. Wherever a spurt of our blood fell, on that spot shall spurt forth our courage and our spirit. The morning sun will brighten our day, and yesterday will disappear with our foe. But if the sun delays to rise at dawn, then let this song be a password for generations to come. This song is written with our blood, not with lead. It is not a song of a free bird flying overhead. Amid crumbling walls, a people sang this song with grenades in their hands. So never say the road now ends for you, although skies of lead block out days of blue. Our longed-for hour will yet come. Our step will beat out, we are here. So, never say the road now ends for you, although the skies of lead block out days of blue. Our longed-for hour will yet come. Our step will beat out, we are here. And I will add to that, never forget.
As we wind down, I want to thank everyone who's in attendance here tonight. And I want to thank those who have attended on the live stream. And most of all, I want to thank those who participated and those who organized, Barbara Strauss and Dara Schachter. This is such an honor to begin this tradition at our shul, to tell the stories of the family members and the loved ones, the survivors. And so, Barbara, I want to invite you up to just say a few more words. Then Dara will be coming up to introduce a poem which will be read by Lila before we conclude. Lila Shapiro.
I just, again, want to thank everyone for helping us get to this point. Also, if anyone has any questions for any of us that participated, please feel free to ask afterwards or on Shabbos or whenever you would like. But I hope that this is something that we can continue. As you heard, it means an awful lot to me. And this is how I came to be involved in this synagogue, through what I told you about my dad. So thank you again for allowing me to be part of this. Thank you.
Before Lila comes up and reads the poem, I wanted to just describe Theresienstadt a little bit. So it was a camp that was created, a transit camp and ghetto by the Nazis very early in 1941. But it wasn't until November 24th, 1941 that the first 1,000 Jews arrived. Between then and its liberation in May, the Nazis imprisoned 140,000 Jews there. In the beginning, Theresienstadt was what the Germans euphemistically called a settlement for Jews living in Germany and Austria who would not be evacuated to the east for labor. They used a lot of euphemisms. That was their term for sending them east to concentration and death camps. So Theresienstadt opened up to Jews 65 and older and German and Austrian Jewish World War I veterans who were disabled or had been awarded a certain medal. And later, it was that the Nazis deported a third category there, which was prominent Jews and their families. So there were a lot of children that came into the camp. The Nazis created this fiction of Theresienstadt as a settlement so that the public everywhere, both domestic and abroad, would believe their story that Jews were just being resettled in the East. Here was Theresienstadt, they said, the settlement for Jews who can't work, and so we have a place for them. Of the 140,000 that were in Theresienstadt, or Theresen, it's also called Theresen, 33,000 died in the ghetto of starvation or of the living conditions or disease. Then the Nazis sent 90,000 to ghettos in the east, Lodz, Riga, Kovno, and Minsk, from where they were later deported to death camps, if they had still survived those ghettos. Or the Nazis transported them directly to Majdanek, Sobibor, and Auschwitz. In Theresienstadt, there were 15,000 Jewish children that at one time or another lived there under the age of 15. And although they were forbidden to do so, they did go to school. They painted pictures, they wrote poetry. They lived as best as they could. Less than 100 of them survived. What did survive were many of their poems and their drawings. And the poem we're about to hear was written by a boy whose name we don't know, who was in Theresienstadt. We don't know anything about him, but we have his poem.
Can I adjust it? Okay, that's good. Okay. Okay. A letter to Daddy. Mama told me to write to you today, but I had no time. New children arrived with the latest transport, and I had to play with them. I didn't notice time pass. I live better these days. I sleep on my own mattress on the floor so I will not fall down. At least I don't have much work to fix up my bed, and in the morning I see the sky from my window. I was coughing a bit, but I don't want to get sick, for I am happy when I can run in the courtyard. Tonight there will be a gathering, like the ones at Scout Camp in the summer. We will sing songs we know. A girl will play the accordion. I know you wonder how we fare here, and you would surely like to be with us now. And something else, Daddy. Come soon and have a more cheerful face. When you are unhappy, Mama is sad, and then I miss the sparkle in her eyes. You promised to bring me books because truly I have nothing to read. So please, come tomorrow right before dusk. I will surely be grateful for this. Now I must stop. Mama sends you her love. I will rejoice when I hear your footsteps in the hall. Until you are with us again, I send you my greetings and kisses. Your faithful son.
Please rise for the Kaddish. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei Rabbah v'alma divrach irusei v'amlich malchusei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol beis Yisrael v'agalau v'zman kariv v'yimru amen Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam ulmei olmaya Yisparach v'yishtabach v'yispa'ar v'yisramam v'yisnasei v'yisadar v'yisalev v'yisalal shmei dekudesha berichu le'ela min kol birchasa v'shirasa tushbechasa v'nechemasa damiran v'alma v'imru amen Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen Oseh shalom b'mramav Hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Kol od balev avenima nefesh Yehudi hamiyah ulfateh mizrach kadima Ayin Letzion Sophia Od lo avda tikvateinu Hatikva bat shnot alvayim Liotam chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim Liotam chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. I want to thank everyone for coming. And I want to close with a quick, easy mitzvah. May this mitzvah be in honor of all of the ones we remembered tonight. You could say the blessing after me, or say amen to my blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddishanu b'mitzvosav V'tzivanu al sviras ha'omer. Blessed are you, O God, creator of this universe, who made us holy with commandments and commanded us to count the days of the Omer. Hayom shneim asar yom.
Hayom shneim asar yom.
Shehem shavua echad.
Shehem shavua echad.
V'chamisha yamim.
Chamisha yamim.
Laomer.
Laomer.
Today is the 12th day.
Today is the 12th day.
Which is equal to a week and 5 days.
Equal to a week and 5 days.
Of the Omer.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you again, Barbara and Dara.
Yes, we do have to have it when everybody's here. We have to do one of these every year. Lila, very good.
I'll give you a Jewish compliment. You look so good, I didn't recognize you. What's for you?
Ema buddy.
It's like, that's why you might have
Good.